Welcome back. Today we are visiting Meise Nkaiseng with Red Door.
Good day. Today we've got Avi and Milani from Meise Nkaiseng Incorporated. On my right I have Joe, he's our Red Door Properties Office Manager, and we're going to share some relevant information and answer some questions which will help you as a buyer out there when you purchase your property through Red Door.
Thanks guys, thanks for coming. One of the big questions I get from our clients is, okay, we've appointed attorney X, but now they're getting phone calls from attorneys Y and Z. How many attorneys, what does the legal process actually work? Who is involved in the registration of a property?
Okay, mostly there's 3 attorneys that can be involved. It's the transferring attorneys. They deal with the transfer of the property. If there's a bond that needs to be registered, there will be a bond attorney. And if there's an existing bond or bonds that need to be cancelled, there will be a cancellation attorney.
Okay, so it's basically then they can work with up to 3 attorneys on the transaction. Are the costs? Who pays for what? That's also a big question that comes up a lot. You know, what is the seller paying for? What is the buyer paying for? You know, because at the end of the day, costs are important.
Of course, yes. First of all, legal costs associated with transfers are calculated based on a set tariff, which is published by the Law Society of South Africa on an annual basis. It's a sliding scale based on the value of the purchase price at the time of conclusion of the agreement. Now, the seller normally pays for the agent's commission that emanate from the proceeds of the sale, and then also rates clearance figures if there's an arrears. He will pay for the cancellation of the bond if there's a bond registered over the property, and in the event of arrear levies, he will also be liable for the levies that needs to be settled. The purchaser pays for the cost associated with the transfer, as well as the cost associated with registering a bond if the transaction is subject to a bond registration.
Okay. And we were talking a lot of the time, the clients also ask, but we're talking about conveyancer, but aren't I supposed to work with an attorney? Can you perhaps just clarify the difference between a conveyancer and an attorney?
Okay, the conveyancer is an admitted attorney, but not all attorneys are conveyancers. So to be a conveyancer, you have to pass a written examination and also be appointed as conveyancer by the High Court of South Africa. Conveyancers are specialists in the field, in property related.
Okay,
here at Meise Nkaiseng, do you have conveyancers?
Yes, we do. We have 3 conveyancers. It's myself, Milani Klip, Avi van Wyk, and Yolandi Botha. And we have other attorneys as well, but they don't deal with property related matters.
Avi, once we've got a contract signed and we come and give it to you, what is the process there from there on? So the registration process, how does that work?
Well, first of all, if the agreement is subject, the transaction is subject to a loan, we still need to wait for the loan to be approved by the banks. Once that suspensive condition has been met, the attorney will then start to attend to the transfer process. The agreement will have to be perused. The attorney will apply, if required, for a cancellation figure as well as a rates clearance figure at the local municipality. If there's a body corporate involved, we'll apply for a levy clearance figure as well. Once the documentation has been signed by both the purchaser and the seller, the documentation will be finalized. The attorney will obtain guarantees from the bond registration attorneys, as well as procure the levy clearance and rates clearance figures from the relevant entities that needs to issue those. At this stage, the documents will most probably be ready to lodge, and the attorney will liaise with the bond registration attorneys, cancellation attorneys, as well as the correspondence in Pretoria, and lodgement will be arranged. Documents will be lodged at the deeds office in Pretoria, and it will go through an examination process lasting approximately 5 to 7 work days, whereafter transfer will be registered. Once the transaction is registered, the attorney will finalize the financial matters incidental to the transaction and receive the title deed from the deeds office after it has been microfilmed, and hand that in the event that it's a cash transaction to the purchase of the property. If a bond is registered over the property, the original title deed will be forwarded to the bank as security for the loan, as part of the security look. We'll forward the documentation, we'll forward the title deed to the bank, which serves as part of the security incidental to the loan.
Harvey, that's quite a lot of work you do behind the scenes. Tell me, at what stages can the purchaser and seller, because I suppose they don't have to remember everything on that, what you just said. At what stages do you communicate what at them? Is there certain highlighted stages they should wait for? I know, like, I think the suspensive fulfilling of a suspensive condition is a big thing, because then the contract is valid. Is there any other stages that's highlighted that they must be aware or be on the lookout for?
Joe, it depends on attorney firm to attorney firm, but at our office we give a weekly report to all the parties concerned with the transaction. Stages to be highlighted is obviously when the loan is approved, that's the first thing.
Yeah.
And then once we've procured the rates clearance figure as well as transfer duty receipts, and then on lodgement as well as registration, that is highlights. But at your office, as I've said, we communicate on a weekly basis to the parties
during
progress
this
in the
whole
matter.
process, they don't have to stress about everything. So during the whole process, you would keep them posted and up to date what's going on.
Yeah.
That's good. And tell me, this whole process, what is the time frame you usually work on?
Yeah, that's a difficult question. Most people want to know that, and usually it takes between 8 to 12 weeks for a registration, but it depends. If there's a later state involved, it can take longer, but mostly between 8 to 12 weeks from the beginning to good end.
And a cash transaction, will that take a lot quicker?
Yeah, it can, because there's not a bond involved. So maybe about 2 weeks, you can say about 6 weeks.
Okay. Then. That's
Okay, you just mentioned later state. The later state is when somebody is deceased and he's still, or the property is still registered in his name. Why would that take longer? What happens there?
Okay, first the estate has to be reported at Malta, and then an executor letter of executorship must be issued. So that's the first part. So it's very important to determine who the executor in the estate is, and it has to be stated in the contract. So contractually, only the executor in the estate can
Sign
transfer documents.
And if the executor hasn't been appointed as yet, how long can that take before they appoint someone?
That depends on the different masters. The master office, it depends. If it's the master's office in Johannesburg, it takes, you can say, about a month, but the master in Pretoria takes longer. So that can take a couple of months to get that.
So if you've already got an executor, the transaction might go a little bit quicker?
Yeah, it can, but also we need to get a Section 42.2 master certificate. So that's a very important document with later states. It's we need that from a master to give his consent that we can go on with the transfer of the property out of the estate. So that's a second document that we need to get, and that can also take a month or so to get that sorted.
Okay, so with later states, what does the normal seller do? So basically, a parent, a spouse passed away, he inherited a share. What is their next step to register the property over to their name?
Joe, the property is left to heirs and the estate is not dealt with. Now, first of all, the estate need to be dealt with and properly wound up before the purchaser may conclude an agreement. He needs to be entitled to sell the property. Consequently, the estate process needs to be dealt with first. That means that an executive will have to be appointed. The executive will go through various administrative processes and publish what we call a liquidation distribution account. If that liquidation distribution account is accepted by the master and published without objection, then the estate may proceed. And there's a transfer process that needs to be effected. The property needs to be registered in the heir's name physically. Obviously, if this is dealt before or dealt with before the heir wants to sell the property, it's not a problem. However, if it happens that the property is sold and the heir is not yet the registered owner of the property, that process will have to be dealt with first. Now, timelines, it's difficult to say, as Melanie has mentioned before, depending on the various master's office, there is a substantial difference in dealing with certain master's offices versus others. So a estate would normally take anything up to from 6 months to a year to finalize, and then you can only deal with the property.
And now the title deed. The seller was in possession of the title deed, and now the children or the spouse come in and they can't find the title deed. Will that also make a difference on the transaction? What do you do if your property's title deed has been lost?
If the title deed is lost, you need to keep in mind that the deeds office, and that's one of the functions of the deeds office, keep record of all registered title deeds. So in general, you may apply in terms of Regulation 68(1) for a lost title deed. What happens then is that you need to advertise in the local newspaper 2 successive weeks, and depending on the deeds office which you're dealing with, they've got slightly different processes, but the application needs to lie for comment or insight at the relevant registrar's office, and whereafter you may apply for what we call a VA copy or registration copy. On issue of that registration copy, the original title deed will lapse, and if you were to find it subsequently, you need to lodge it with the master for destruction. Or rather, if you were to find it subsequently, you need to lodge it at the registrar's office for destruction.
And a cost involved in getting a new title deed or a copy of the title deed?
Well, the cost would involve, obviously, the cost of the advertisement in the local newspapers, approximately 6,000 rand, all cost included.
So if my title deed is lost, then I can come and see you,
yes,
and you'll be able to assist me in applying, go through that whole process.
Definitely.
We are working very closely with your conveyancing department. I know it's you and Melanie, you've got ladies as well. But Meise Nkaiseng do other legal work as well. I don't know if you want to elaborate a bit on that.
Yes, Meise Nkaiseng is primarily focused on corporate work. Then we also got a strong department dealing with estates, municipal law, and as we've mentioned, conveyancing. So each of the attorneys dealing with the various aspects of the legal sphere are specialists in their area, and if I were to get a complicated commercial transaction, I would refer it to one of the specialists in the firm. If they get a transfer, they'll be referring to one of the conveyancers in the firm. So at the firm, all of us specialize in a specific field of law to enable us to provide a specialist service to our clients.
So how long has Meise Nkaiseng been around?
The company in its current form has been practicing since 2002, but prior to that, Stephen Meise, my partner, has had his own practice, and the existing company is the result of a merger between an old firm, DJ Malan & Hofman, later known as Malan & Hofman Attorneys, whose roots can be tracked back to the early 1940s.
I know you have an office in Vereeniging and an office in Vanderbijlpark. What does your staff complement consist of? I see you've got an office in Vereeniging. We deal mostly with Vereeniging, but you also have an office in Vanderbijlpark. What does your staff complement consist of?
Gwenda, you're right. We have 2 offices, Vereeniging and Vanderbijlpark. Vereeniging deals mainly with conveyancing-related matters, and Vanderbijl with corporate and commercial matters, as well as some conveyancing matters. Our staff complement consists of 8 attorneys with 34 support staff.
Thank you, Avi, and thank you, Melanie, for joining us today. Listeners, if you would like to make contact with these attorneys, their numbers are on the screen. We thank you for joining us, and we will see you next week on our next episode.